What if the worst moment of your life became the starting point for something you never imagined? A pregnant young woman, homeless and desperate, and a lonely man, trapped in his work routine, cross paths in the most unexpected way. What could emerge from a simple accident? Let's find out. It was a cold and rainy night. The deserted streets were shrouded in darkness, seemingly swallowing everything around them. Grace was a young woman, but her life had already been marked by challenges that felt too immense for her to bear. 7 months pregnant, she had lost everything she once held dear. Her relationship with Charles, the baby's father, had collapsed devastatingly when his true nature, a manipulative and aggressive man, came to light, leaving her emotionally shattered and without a home. With no family to turn to and only a few friends who could offer help, Grace found herself alone, carrying the weight of a pregnancy and the uncertainty of her future. On that cold, rainy night, her hopes were nearing their breaking point. Clutching her backpack containing her few belongings, she walked through the empty streets, one hand cradling her belly as if it were a shield. Each step felt heavier than the last, but her determination to find shelter kept her moving. The biting wind stung her skin, and the distant sound of rain mirrored the chaos in her heart. She knew she couldn't afford to stop, even as the shadows around her seemed to dance threateningly. Suddenly, the sound of an approaching engine caught her attention. Before she could react, headlights illuminated her frail figure, and in the blink of an eye, the impact threw her to the ground. Pain shot through her leg, and she instinctively placed her hands on her belly, whispering in panic, "Baby, please be okay." The car screeched to a halt, and a tall, well-dressed man rushed out. It was Evan, a man used to controlling every aspect of his life, now in sheer desperation. "My God, I didn't see you crossing," he said, kneeling beside her. When he realized Grace was pregnant, his heart seemed to stop. Without hesitation, he insisted on taking her to the hospital. Although reluctant, Grace accepted the help. At the hospital, doctors confirmed the baby was unharmed but advised strict rest due to a minor sprain in her leg. Evan, who had never seen Grace before that moment, was consumed with guilt over the accident. He felt an overwhelming responsibility to help her in any way possible. Despite Grace's attempts to send him away, Evan remained resolute. "You need help, and I'll make sure you're safe," he said with conviction, showing a concern that went beyond expectations. Grace spent 2 days in the hospital under medical supervision, and Evan visited her constantly to check on her condition. Despite her reassurances, he felt deeply responsible and wanted to do everything he could to help her. When the doctors finally discharged Grace, they warned her that she needed careful attention due to the final stages of her pregnancy. Concerned, Evan asked where she would go. It was then, in her vulnerability, that Grace admitted she had nowhere to go. She didn't share many details of her story, but her words were enough for Evan to feel the weight of her circumstances. Moved, he insisted even more strongly that she stay at his house, at least until she was better. Grace hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the idea, but ultimately accepted the offer, grateful and without other options. Upon arriving at Evan's mansion, Grace was overwhelmed. It was a grand place with towering windows, gleaming marble, and a design that seemed straight out of a dream. But for her, it was intimidating. The housekeeper warmly welcomed her and showed her to a cozy room, but Grace still felt out of place. The days that followed were filled with cautious interactions. Evan made it a point to care for Grace, preparing meals and ensuring she followed the doctor's recommendations. He tried to understand who this woman was, one who seemed to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. Slowly, Grace began to see a different side of him. Despite his confident demeanor and seemingly perfect life, Evan was thoughtful, caring, and above all, genuine. Evan was a man whose life appeared perfect from the outside. As the owner of a business empire, he was known for his sharp decision-making and precision. Yet behind the facade of success lay a lonely man. Evan devoted all his energy to work, as though it were a way to fill the void in his personal life. He avoided emotional connections, fearing they would distract him from his goals. However, beneath this outward coolness, Evan had a kind heart. His carefully planned routine was about to change irrevocably the day he met Grace. One day, as Evan played in the garden with the house dog, Grace watched him through the window. He seemed so carefree, laughing at himself as he stumbled. Without realizing it, she smiled. When he came back inside, Grace remarked almost shyly, "You should smile more. It suits you." Evan was caught off guard by her spontaneity but returned the smile. That simple interaction opened the door to something greater. They began to talk, and Evan shared a bit about his life. He described his hectic and demanding routine, driven by his businesses and ventures. Many saw him as a cold and reserved person, which wasn't entirely untrue. He was indeed private, but he found joy in the small things around him. He mentioned his dog, a loyal companion who brought him moments of happiness amidst the chaos of his daily life. As he spoke, Evan relaxed, and Grace realized he wasn't just the distant businessman he appeared to be. Gently, he asked, "Grace, if you're comfortable, would you like to share a bit of your story with me?" The question was so delicately posed that Grace could tell Evan genuinely wanted to listen without judgment. This gesture allowed her to share parts of her life more freely, deepening the connection between them. Feeling more at ease, Grace decided to open up about her own story. She shared that she had lost her parents at a young age and was raised by an aunt. During that time, she met Charles, her ex-partner. At first, she thought she had finally found the happy life she always dreamed of with him, but over time, she realized things were taking a darker turn. Grace revealed that Charles was controlling and manipulative and that, even while pregnant, she decided to leave. "I couldn't bring my daughter into that environment," she said, her voice trembling. "I had to be strong and leave, even though I didn't know where I was going." Evan was deeply moved by her story. He never imagined that this young woman, who seemed so calm at first glance, had faced such immense challenges in her life. To him, it felt as though a new layer of grace had been revealed, showcasing her strength and resilience even more. From that moment, their connection began to grow naturally. There was something genuine in the respect and admiration they started to feel for each other. Despite the unspoken nature of their feelings, the exchange of confidences brought them closer, creating a bond that, though subtle, was undeniably strong. Evan felt a mixture of curiosity and admiration. This woman, who had been a complete stranger just days earlier, now intrigued him in ways he couldn't explain. He tried to mask the whirlwind of thoughts with a light smile, but the impact of their exchange lingered. Grace, in turn, noticed something different in Evan's gaze but chose not to comment. They continued their conversation, but that moment marked a quiet turning point in their dynamic. The days passed, and Grace remained at Evan's mansion. For her, it was a time of peace and joy, something she never expected to experience after the storm of difficulties she had endured. Grace found tranquility in the routine, and she and Evan began to form a bond. They talked a lot, and their presence became a source of comfort for each other. With each passing day, Evan grew more fond of having Grace in his home and his life, and for Grace, the feeling was mutual. However, everything remained quiet and unspoken. Grace didn't want to complicate things and was focused on awaiting her baby's arrival. For Evan, it was the same. Though he was developing feelings for her, he respected the fragile moment Grace was living through. Then came the day when Grace finally went into labor. It was an emotional day for her. Rushed to the hospital, she felt a mix of anxiety and joy. Evan, who was at his company when he received the news, dropped everything and went straight to the hospital. The delivery went smoothly, and Grace gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. When Evan entered the room to meet the baby, he was overcome with emotions he had never felt before. He was utterly captivated, seeing Grace holding her daughter in her arms, looking radiant and strong. That moment touched something deep within him. As Evan looked at Grace, still lying in the bed, his eyes shone, and he couldn't hold back the words that came straight from his heart. He approached her gently and said, "Grace, I never imagined that something as unexpected as that little accident could bring you into my life. You and your daughter are the people I didn't know I needed, but God knew I did." His voice carried a sincerity and tenderness that made Grace feel the weight and meaning of his words. Grace, overcome with emotion, locked eyes with Evan, tears streaming down her face. "Evan, I don't know what to say. You've been such a huge support, and hearing this," she paused, trying to hold back her tears. "I feel the same. You've brought something into my life that I thought I'd never have again, hope." After all this, Grace was discharged and taken back to Evan's mansion. He respectfully suggested she stay as long as she needed, and Grace accepted, feeling safe and welcomed. Days turned into weeks, and their relationship grew even stronger, filled with simple yet meaningful moments. However, Grace's past came back to haunt her. Charles, the father of her baby, reappeared, demanding to be part of the child's life. His presence brought back painful memories. Charles was manipulative and aggressive, but this time, Grace wasn't alone. Evan stood by her side, facing Charles and promising to protect her. "You're not going to hurt her again," Evan said firmly. Charles continued to threaten them, but this time, Grace was ready to stand up to him. With Evan's support, she took legal action to ensure Charles could no longer interfere in her new life. This final confrontation marked a turning point for Grace, who realized she no longer had to face everything alone. As time went on, Evan and Grace grew even closer. He confessed his feelings, telling her that his life had changed since she came into it. "You've given meaning to everything," he said. One day, during a picnic in the garden, Evan got down on one knee and proposed to Grace. Surprised and overwhelmed with emotion, she accepted. The wedding was a celebration filled with joy and love, with their baby at the center of it all, symbolizing the future they were building together. Evan and Grace learned that love can emerge in the most unexpected moments, bringing healing and transformation. Together, they faced challenges and found peace, proving that even the scars of the past can be overcome with love and hope. A life that once seemed full of uncertainties became a journey of shared happiness and companionship. Evan and Grace discovered that love doesn't just heal, it profoundly transforms. They tackled obstacles that once seemed insurmountable and together, found not only peace but a renewed reason to believe in life. Their story reminds us that the scars of the past don't define who we are, they are simply marks that guide us to something greater. Fate can change everything, and the greatest rewards often come from the most unlikely moments. Love, after all, has the power to rebuild what seemed lost and show us that even in the hardest times, there's always hope for a new beginning. If this story touched your heart and made you believe in the power of love and new beginnings, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Here, stories like this come to life to inspire and move you. Share it with someone who also needs to believe that life can surprise us in wonderful ways. And in the comments, let us know, what was the most emotional moment for you? We're excited to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.